Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the English Support Podcast. So, my name is Kieran. I am one of the English support tutors on the Manchester campus of Elizabeth School of London. And today's episode is hopefully going to be a really engaging one for you. I'm joined by someone who's right at the heart of helping students get the most out of their time in higher education. So, our guest this week is Lauren. She is an information and support officer at Victoria College of Arts and Design. She's got a great perspective on switching between languages, building confidence, and helping students feel like they belong. So, Lauren, welcome and thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So let's start with your current role, which is Information and Support Officer at VCAT. So what does the job involve and what does a typical day look like for you?
So we are the first port of call for any kinds of student query, and we basically work as the bridge between the students and the academics and other student services departments. So the days are really varied. It can be anything from hosting events. So last week we had a reinduction event, so we help with kind of the more practical side of things, helping students to complete their re-enrollment, signposting them to the student finance department to make sure that they've completed all of the relevant forms and documents before they come back to us. We also help signpost students, if they're going through a difficult time, if they've gone through a bereavement or they're, having any kind of mental or physical health struggles. We will, provide also a bit of pastoral support as well, make sure that they are in contact with the right people, signpost them to the health and wellbeing department.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also provide a lot of kind of administrative support, so making sure that any group changes are complete on time, any students that are wanting to transfer their course, we help liaise with the registry department. So we're kind of at the core of all of the student services departments, which means that we get a really, really good insight on what's going on with the cohorts. We get to build some really good relationships with the students and also with all of the other kinds of student services and academic departments.
Well, it sounds like you do a really crucial job there, yeah? And I really hope that your students appreciate the work they're putting in. Now, for some of our listeners, they may have noticed that you've got a bit of an accent there, that you work in Manchester, but you're originally from Liverpool.
Yeah.
So do you ever find that people struggle to understand your accent here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been living in Manchester for 5 years now. I came for university, and I kind of thought that only being kind of 45 minutes, down the motorway, that there wouldn't really be any issues. And I kind of came to uni, and it was just me and loads of Londoners and a lot of Southerners who just had never heard of half the words I was saying, thought that I was speaking a different language. I've had people ask me, think that I'm actually not from England because they couldn't understand me. So I've had to learn over the years to really tone my accent down, in the workplace and when I'm not at home. But yeah, you get some funny interaction. But yeah, I think over the years I've learned there's a lot of words that we use in Liverpool that just aren't used anywhere else. Like blag, for example. If something is fake, we say it's blag. I didn't know that was I didn't know that was a Scouse thing. So yeah, I enjoy actually when people, nicely point out things that aren't they're not nationwide phrases. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's nice to have the difference. It's not wrong, it is just different.
Yeah.
It's a different thing. Yeah. Well, English isn't the only language that you can speak, and you did study French and Spanish at university. So what first sparked your interest in languages?
I think genuinely just the teachers that I had at school were really, really engaging. It works with my brain quite well because language learning is fairly structured in that you have to learn the grammatical rules and you have to learn the conjugations, but equally there's a lot of irregularities and there's a lot of phrases can't be directly translated, and so for me, I get the best of both worlds because there's a structure that I can follow and I can be a bit flexible and a bit creative within that. If I'm let loose kind of creative writing in an English lesson, that was I just wasn't creative enough for that. But if I was sat in a maths lesson, that was too structured for me. I couldn't, I found that really difficult to engage with. So language learning I found really rewarding as well because there were real life kind of rewards in terms of actually being able to connect and engage and communicate with people. And then that was kind of consolidated when we went on a school trip when I was about 14 to Paris, and I just completely fell in love with the city. I just was walking around like, this could be my life. I'd love to live here. And I totally was like, this is what I want to go forward and do. And luckily I had teachers that really pushed me, and they really instilled in me that was something that I could do. I think particularly coming from a more working class background and being in a state school, that was something that our teachers were really good at, really inspiring the students and pushing them to do more and, think beyond where we've come from. And, pushed us to use our experience to drive us forward. So yeah, I think one, it works very well with my brain. I get the best of both worlds. And two, I was very lucky to have, mentors and teachers that pushed and guided me to pursue my interests.
Well, you not only learned French, but you also spent some time working in France. So what was that like? Did you ever have any surprises or language mix-up?
Yeah, so I worked as an English teacher in Paris, or just outside. So I lived in kind of central Paris, which was just incredible. It was, it genuinely, I think, was the best year of my life. I loved working there. I loved living there. I think there was a culture shock when I arrived. I wasn't able to do A-level French because there wasn't enough students at my school that wanted to do it. So I'd done Spanish, and then I basically picked French back up at university on the ab initio course. So it's like you basically learn it from scratch. So I'd spent 2 years in COVID learning pretty basic French. I would say it was below A-level at this point.
Yeah.
So I knew the grammar, I knew the rules, I felt like I knew key vocab, and I went, and the first day that I got to France, one of my other friends from university was studying in Paris. I went to meet him for a coffee. We have the coffee, we're like, how great is this? We're in Paris, we've made it. It comes to getting to pay, and he goes, do you want to ask for the bill? And I said, no, you can do it. And he was like, I don't know how to, because I've come here to learn French, but, you've been learning French for years. And I sat there and I was like, I don't know how to ask for the bill. Like, I've been so focused on the grammar, and learning, how to get through the airport and visas. And I was traveling on my own. So I was, panicked about, okay, I need to know exactly which taxi to get into. I need to know how to work the metro. And I get, asking for the bill. And I was like, I have no idea how to do this. So I think that was my first kind of like, okay, I really need to think about the French that I've learned in, academically and learn how to apply it in real life. I remember the first time that I had to go and they have like a Navigo card, which is their version of like an Oyster card like they'd have in London for the metro. And I was trying to explain to the woman in the ticket office that, I lived here, I was showing my visa, because there's different rates depending on whether you're a tourist or a citizen. Thank God there was a really, really lovely old man who obviously heard the conversation, and I'd done quite well, and I'd prepared up to a certain point, I'd revised up to a certain point, and then she asked me a question. I thought, I don't know how to do this, and he came and stepped in and helped me get my Navigo pass. So that was
Well, I'm sure our students can sympathise with that. Like you learn a language at high school or even in college or university, and then you land in the place, and you just don't have that practical day-to-day knowledge of the language that can really do it. But you can only really learn that through time,
Yeah.
effort, immersion, experience, things like that.
Yeah.
So obviously some kind of ups and downs while learning
Mm.
languages, but how has that experience then of learning language, how has that influenced how you support your students today, especially those students you have who are trying to learn English as well?
Yeah, so I support a lot of students whose English is their second or sometimes even third language. I think having gone and learned two languages myself, both in an academic sense and then also gone and lived or worked in the countries in France and Spain, it's really taught me, number one, to slow down.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that when I first started working in the high school in France, the students were just like, we have no idea what you're saying. Like, so that really, really taught me to slow down and to think about the way that I'm phrasing things. So from my own experience of learning a language, sometimes there is just key vocab that you're just not aware of because it's specific to the country or it's specific to, for example, like a digital platform that you just never used at home. So I think firstly understanding how the information is going to be received and tailoring it to somebody that is learning English is something that it's really allowed me to build very strong relationships with the students because I understand on a personal level what it's like to go to a country where you don't speak their native language and
Yeah.
trying to live and work and do all these things. So firstly, I think leading with understanding and compassion, and secondly also advocating for those students.
Yeah.
So kind of behind the scenes, obviously, when you working at a university or any kind of organization, there's lots of times when, a new rule will come into place or there'll be a new, say, digital platform that, they're wanting the students to use or the clients or whoever. So I have the ability from my own experience of learning language, I've got my own ability to look at those platforms or look at those rules that are being introduced and think about how that will be received by somebody who doesn't speak English fluently.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that I can really tailor my support to the students by, working with, for example, the student engagement team to create some digital resources. It influences the way that I would communicate with students. So I really make sure that I explain things clearly, give examples, and use more accessible vocabulary that an English learner is more likely to know.
So obviously, so your students come to you
Mm,
with many different issues, but
yeah.
what kind of things do you hear your students worrying about when it comes to speaking or writing in English?
I think a lot of the time it's the confidence. So I get a lot of students saying I'm not very good or my English isn't very good or I'm not very good at writing emails because I don't really know how, what the conventions are.
Hmm.
So I think, I mean, that goes for any language learner. Confidence is one of the most important things, I would say. Having the confidence to make mistakes and to be corrected and to learn from those mistakes is
Hmm.
so valuable. So yeah, I get a lot of worries about whether their English is good enough, and most of the time their English is brilliant.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it as much as I can understand from a technical and a grammatical point of view, sometimes the most or the hardest part of my job, but the most important part of my job when supporting a student who is learning English is purely just building that confidence,
Hmm.
trying to get them comfortable and, starting on talking about topics that I know that they will, be able to access or
Hmm.
that they'll have more things to say to get them comfortable in talking about, more technical issues.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think I would say confidence is the biggest thing.
Yeah, certainly, because we have students who need to remember that it's better to speak and to
Yeah,
make a mistake than to not
yeah,
speak at all,
yeah,
and you only ever improve by practicing
yeah.
whatever you do by experimenting and things like and you can only really learn from your mistakes and being
Hmm.
corrected and I think we're quite laid back in the UK about if people's English is maybe not as good as we would want we just as long as you understand it doesn't really matter that they're not correct
Yeah,
as long as the meaning is being conveyed then we're quite relaxed about it really.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And do you think there is a difference then between learning a language for exam and using it to really communicate and connect with people.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the two hardest things I think in any, second or third language to convey are politeness and humor. And really, they're the main ways that we can connect with people when we communicate. I think, yeah, when you training or you studying or preparing for an exam and you're trying to pass or get a certain grade, it's very, very regimented and really quite structured in what you need to know, how you approach the exam. You also part of language learning in an academic sense is learning the specification, and it's learning actually how to sit the exam rather than speaking the language. And it serves a purpose. But yeah, that was the most difficult thing that I found when moving to France, was that on paper I was okay. I could read it. If it was, I could read French. I felt like I could understand French. But when you have accents thrown into the mix, when you have, you sat in a busy restaurant and there's lots and lots of other conversations that are going on, also in a foreign language, your brain is naturally trying to pick that up and translate it at the same time. So you really have to learn, firstly, to be okay with not understanding everything. You have to learn to be okay with asking somebody to repeat 2, 3, maybe 4 times, or to speak really slowly. But yeah, I think learning a language academically is kind of a fairly steady progression. Learning a language to properly communicate and connect with people is something that is definitely rockier. Because it's scary. It means that you have to actually go out and you have to speak to people, and you might say, something that you don't actually intend to say, and you translate it wrong, or it can be really it can feel very awkward and really very anxiety inducing. But I think learning a language in the country, or learning a language when you're speaking with people in real life, teaches you more than learning a language on paper does, because it teaches you confidence. It teaches you to actually to be okay with being anxious and nervous, and to be able to sit with it, take a breath and push through it anyway. And I think maybe that's something that it's not necessarily spoken about as much when you're learning a language in the classroom.
Yeah.
Is that you have so many external factors going on when you sat in, a real life situation. There's so much more going on. So yeah.
Yeah, I say that's a very good point, because if you don't know how to swim, you can watch a YouTube video.
Yeah.
You can read how to swim, but until you actually get in the swimming pool and you're in that situation, there's no way to know how you will react.
Yeah.
But I mean, living and communicating and connecting in a language, and especially in English, is very rewarding, because if you do communicate, then you feel better. You're like, I can do this. I am able to do this. I have achieved it. I've studied this language for however many years, and now I can actually convey an important message, and the other person can understand me. I think all of our students should be proud of that. They have come so far, and now they're able to express themselves in academia in another language. I can't. I mean, I didn't study languages at university. I can't even imagine being able to do that in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think, it's tough. And again, I think that's not necessarily spoken about either. The mental battle that comes alongside the kind of academic battle, especially, you've got added things in. You're not with you might not be with your family. You don't have maybe an established friendship group. So we have so many students that are basically setting up or starting their whole lives over again and going to university. That is just like, I mean, I went and worked in France, but I had friends that went and, they studied in different countries, and it is really, really tough and very, very impressive.
Yeah, they should be immensely proud of how far they've come.
They should.
So you mentioned that you were an English teacher as well. So what advice would you give to students who want to improve their English, but they aren't really sure where to start?
Start with something manageable. So don't go into it and be like, I'm going to be fluent in English in the next 6 months. You probably not, unless you already have a very high level of language, and that's okay. You're not meant to get it all straight away. You are meant to make mistakes. That is very much part of the language learning process. Something that helped me when I was in France and when I was living there. And, sometimes it can be really difficult because you're like, oh, I should know this by now, or I don't know why I'm finding it so difficult because I've been here, I've been learning this language for 3 years. And somebody pointed out to me, you've been learning this language for 3 years and as a second language and, kind of part time, that's not the language that you speak all the time. Think about what the language level of an actual 3-year-old would be who has literally been born and raised, and this is in the country, in the language, this is the only language that they know. Yeah, be realistic with your goals, set small, manageable tasks. So I would pick, a music album or a TV show or a film that really sparks your interest. So don't go and read and listen to and watch things that you're not interested in just because it's in English.
Yeah.
Find your niche in language learning and run with it. Just start small. So start by watching a children's TV show or reading a children's book, and then maybe do that for a couple of months. Then, move up to watching a TV show or reading a book that you've read in English before or watched in English before, or watch a TV show with English subtitles on, or whichever your native language's subtitles on. And then you can move up to things like writing down any vocab that you didn't know and going and researching it after, writing down any structures that you notice that you haven't used before or maybe that you could use. And really, if you can spend time in the speaking to people, or going to whichever English speaking country you like, and asking people. Some of the best ways that I found that I could learn languages and that kind of organically created a conversation was just by asking people, how do you say this? If you go to a cafe and you order a coffee and you want to know, oh, how do I ask? How would you ask for the bill? Or, what would you recommend? Just starting with small conversations, asking for help, and doing things that interest you are the best way that you are really going to be able to immerse yourself in the language and stick at it.
Yeah, oh yeah, certainly, certainly. So it's basically like do something that you already enjoy, but include English in it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And build it up, don't start by, watching The Godfather or something and thinking, oh my God, I don't understand this, and you're having to concentrate for 3 hours. That's not realistic. An English person would find that, may find that fairly difficult.
Yeah.
Start small, start manageable, and just build it up.
Well, certainly, definitely. And from your own experience, is there a word or a phrase that, in either French or Spanish, that you still love using, or was the one that was particularly troublesome for you at the start?
I do love some Spanish phrases. I really love phrases that aren't directly translated. So obviously in English, we have he's as cool as a cucumber. But in Spanish, they say estar fresco como una lechuga, which means he's as to be as cool as a lettuce, which I find. So I like that one. I like that one.
And were there any that caused you some problems at the start?
Yeah, I moved after France, went and I studied Spanish in Malaga. So in Andalusia, the accents are very, very different. It's kind of, I felt like maybe it was a bit of karma, because it was what I imagine it would be like for somebody to learn English their whole lives and think that they know English, and then be dropped in the middle of Liverpool and not have any idea what people were saying, because the accents are so strong. So they shortened everything. And I remember I was on the way to a lesson one day and the schoolboy stopped me and he was asking me what time it was, which is que hora es, but in Malaga they say que hora, and I was like, sorry, pardon? He's like, que hora? And I was like, I don't understand what this. I was like, I literally don't understand what he's saying. Yeah, that. And I went into school and I asked the one of the teachers. I was like, this boy came up to me and he was asking me a question, and I've never heard that question before. And they then had to explain to the class some kind of Andalusian slang so that we could understand.
Okay. Well, at least we've learned from this podcast today that Malaga is basically the Liverpool of Spain.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right, well, it's good to know. Good to know. So before we finish up, I
Yeah,
hope you don't mind if we have some quick fire questions
sure.
to send us on our way. So you just say what the first thing that comes to your mind for some of these.
Okay.
So this is a question that I've asked a few other people here on the podcast, and
Mm.
is: Are you a tea or a coffee person?
Oh, 100% coffee. Tea, I just don't know what it is about it. I'm not a fan.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. And what was the last TV show that you watched?
Marcos. I'm watching it at the moment, but yeah, that was the last show that I watched.
All right. And what is the best place that you've traveled to?
I mean, obviously, Paris will always have a place in my heart. Honestly, I think most recently Lisbon really, really exceeded my expectations.
Hmm.
And I actually managed to learn a fair bit of Portuguese while I was there. Food was amazing, the people were amazing, the weather's great. Yeah, gorgeous city. Definitely, definitely would go back.
Okay, well, I think if we have anybody who's watching or listening
Yeah.
from Lisbon, they will be super happy your response there. And we'll finish up with your hometown. So,
Yeah.
what is one thing you miss most about Liverpool?
I think the sense of humor is just, it's like no other place on earth, you know. I go
Hmm.
home and I think just, yeah, the chattiness of people. I know
Hmm.
that if I go home and I'm waiting at the bus stop, there's absolutely no way, even if you've got headphones on, it doesn't matter whether you've got like a stone face on, there will be someone's nan that will just sit and chatty for half an hour. So I do miss that sometimes.
Well, that is a wonderful note for us to end on. And Lauren, thank you so much for chatting today.
Thank you for having me.
You've given us a lot to think about, and I'm sure that any students who are listening will take a lot away from your journey and also the advice that you gave us. So thanks again, and to everybody who's listening, see you next time for the English Support Podcast. Bye bye.